Hello and welcome to GMT. I'm Lucy Hockings. Myanmar's military leaders have been accused of carrying out genocide, war crimes and crimes against humanity against Muslim, Rohingyas and other ethnic minorities. A UN report names 6 top generals, including the Commander-in-Chief, Min Aung Hlaing, and says they should be prosecuted at the International Criminal Court. The report also blames the country's leader, Aung San Suu Kyi, for failing to prevent the violence. UN investigators interviewed hundreds of victims and found evidence of rape, torture and murder against the Rohingya in Rakhine State, more than 700,000 of whom are now in Bangladesh. But it also accused the Burmese army of abuses in the states of Kachin in the north and Shan. Let's hear more from the investigators.
They are in flagrant disregard of the life, property and well-being of civilians. They are marked by extreme levels of brutality and disproportionality. They are in the pursuit of deeply discriminatory and exclusionary visions, primarily affecting ethnic and religious minorities. This results in the consistent patterns of serious human rights violations and violations of international humanitarian law in Kachin, Shan and Rakhine states outlined in our report.
The scale, brutality and systematic nature of rape and violence indicate that they are part of a deliberate strategy to intimidate, terrorize or punish the civilian population. They are used as a tactic of war. The acts we found include rape, gang rape, sexual slavery, forced nudity and mutilations.
Well, our Southeast Asia correspondent Jonathan Head has reported extensively from Myanmar, and he told me listening to the UN delivering their report was stunning.
You expect UN reports to be couched in fairly diplomatic terms. They've got to allow for all member states, many of whom are, at least in this region, a bit more sympathetic to Myanmar's position, but they really didn't pull any punches. To actually call for prosecutions for genocide is a big deal. It's not often that the most serious crime any government can be accused of is invoked by the United Nations as a course for prosecution. Then to name names, including Min Aung Hlaing, the commander of the Myanmar Armed Forces and a potential future president of the country. He is now, in effect, being charged as a war criminal, or at least being suspected as a war criminal with charges being recommended. This is devastating. It's devastating for the Myanmar military. We've had a lot of human rights investigations over the last year since the mass exodus of Rohingyas began. They've almost all documented truly shocking levels of abuses, impunity, organisation, a whole range of them. But this fact-finding commission has existed even longer. It goes back more than a year ago. The 3 people leading it are very respected. Marzuki Darusman, particularly respected in this region as a long-standing legal expert, former government official as well in Indonesia. For them to come up with such strong conclusions and such an unqualified demand for international prosecution of the top levels in Myanmar leadership is quite extraordinary. The question really is, where does it go from here? Aung San Suu Kyi herself, I think, is extremely damaged. They did acknowledge that there is no civilian oversight, but the fact is she's chosen right throughout this crisis to side with her own military, never accepting or acknowledging the levels of abuses that have taken place. So there was criticism of her. She's now associated with the wrong side of this report. They did recommend taking the Myanmar generals to the International Criminal Court, but of course Myanmar's not a signatory. It would require a UN Security Council resolution for that to happen, and it's almost certain that China would not accept that. But there is talk of creating a different mechanism, an independent mechanism, to pursue this investigation and eventually pursue prosecutions. That's happened in the case of Syria. Myanmar, in the terms of this UN report, has now been put in the same category as President Assad's government in terms of the levels of its human rights abuses.